Well, good morning, everyone. So first off, a couple of wrenches thrown in this morning. Didn't bring my rain jacket. Just didn't really connect that with swift current over the last couple of years, and then the traffic jam this morning. So these these two things are not items that I plan for when coming to swift current, but in driving here. Wow, what a difference. Such a phenomenal improvement in grass conditions and moisture, obviously. It's awesome to see all the cattle out there, really in some cases up to their bellies. So really, really good to see, and so timely, like we needed it. What I'm hoping here in this update from CCA is that we can I can give you kind of an update on some of the things that I'm a little bit more focused on, but would speak and respond to any questions that you guys have on any CCA initiatives or positions or possible future advocacy work. That's the best, really, opportunity that I have here. If it doesn't happen really while we're talking here this morning, seek me out, and over the course of over the course of the day or tonight, and we can have a discussion. So I do have a bit of a presentation. I'm not sure if it's ready to go here yet, but I'll hit the button and we'll see. I might be winging it. Okay, here we go. Yeah, it's going to come. I was at the meeting here last year. A lot of the same themes. It's funny how some files move so slow and other files are just in hyper mode, like the sustainability presentation we saw with Tammy's presentation. It's a head scratcher that one could think that in 18 months you could develop a whole audit level set of standards that will expose the whole country effectively to new rules. You need to question, I guess, the speed with which it's trying to be implemented. And I'll say, just in response to Tammy's presentation, I can say that the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef is really taking the lead on the beef side. And I thank Ryan Beierbach, he's the current chair, for being here today, and would encourage anybody to seek out Ryan or myself, to talk about our response to some of these changes. First off, I guess, thank you for your support. 53 cents from every animal marketed goes to CCA, and we use that from across the country to do our work. It represents about a $3.9 million budget, which covers off our Calgary and our Ottawa office, as well as all of the people that are that work remotely. And it feels like it's never enough, right? I mean, you can always rationalize more investment in certain things, but I feel like we do get a ton of value for the money. And so let me say thank you for your support. Really, we're here just to show up, right? If we're not there, then the narrative takes a completely different approach, takes a completely different road. Whether that would be from influence from animal rights activists or activist investors or any number of special interest groups, if we're not there speaking about the counter narrative, then quite simply we're going to deal with the consequences of that longer term. And so really that's the main focus. But we engage with in all levels, whether it be at the federal government or to our counterparts in the United States, reflecting the fact that half of all cattle and beef from Canada is pretty much exported, and the United States represents 78 or 80% of those exports. Very critical. And then internationally as well, I think the latest tally is that of a finished carcass, roughly $1,400 can be attributed to those of extra value can be attributed to those export markets. So really, you need to focus your priorities. That we have a finite budget, and we do our best to allocate it to the places that yield the best return. So a couple things that I'd like to speak on that are, things that I deal with regularly, but I'll go through a more exhaustive list just in listing them. The most recent Bill C-282. For those that aren't familiar, it's a bill that would tie the hands of ag negotiators in Canada to remove supply management from the negotiating table in any future trade agreement, which includes the USMCA. There's a requirement on the USMCA to review it every certain number of years, and that next review is coming up in 2026. So when you think about the possibility of negotiators coming to a negotiating table and saying, okay, let's talk about all things ag, and for that matter, all things trade, but just to set the stage, we can't talk about supply management. It just makes no sense that you would approach, regardless of where you are on being a supporter or not of supply management, it doesn't make any sense that you would go and set the table in that way. So quite simply, we're opposed to the bill. Its current status is that it is before the Senate, and it's our hope that the Senate will either kill it or it will die before when the next election happens. On the order paper. Somehow I went back there. Next, private members bill. Actually, pretty pertinent. C-234 is now returned back to the House of Commons with amendments from the Senate. It's actually being introduced this morning again, but it's one of those private members' bill that would benefit agriculture with respect to removing some aspects of the carbon tax off of our operations, but quite simply, it's getting mired in a lot of back and forth. So nothing super pressing or new information on that one. Bill C-285 has made some progress. Bill C-285 is John Barlow's private members bill that introduces regulations regarding biosecurity and bioterrorism. It's rooted, some may recall the activists that entered a premises in southern Alberta. I think it was the turkey operations in southern Alberta. And I think it really did raise concerns about, about how to deal with those situations. And especially, from a cattle perspective, with increased vigilance required in defending against foreign animal disease. With the most recent developments of high pathogen avian influenza happening typically in dairy herds in the United States, and of course what would be a catastrophic concern over foot and mouth disease ever entering Canada. These types of things are regulations. These types of things are legislation that we need to support the right type of behavior. Moving into, I guess, regulation. Really, we're putting a great deal of effort into trying to address a competitive issue in particular with our American counterparts. Quite simply, we will never see additional processing capacity come into Canada if we continually are dealing with a comparative disadvantage with our American counterparts. And the specified risk material processes that are still there from 20 years ago are a good example of that. As a result, we are awaiting a scientific study. I think the peer review process, I'm told, is almost complete. And the idea here is that we will reference this risk analysis to support a change in CFIA's regulation on this topic. So we have a pathway as to how we think we can improve that I guess the playing field by which packers have to operate here in Canada. Transport regulations. We can reference how competitive we are with electronic logging devices with our American counterparts, the transfer of care and the animal transfer record. These items are, quite simply, burdensome administration requirements placed on producers that quite simply are impractical. They sometimes make no connection to each other, and quite simply, CCA has been engaging regularly to help to really have practical results from traceability initiatives that can be useful in the event of a disease outbreak, and not be a barrier to commerce and our businesses. And so I can talk more about that if anybody had interest, but I'll just kind of keep moving on here. I added just to this slide last night a reference to the Beef Code of Practice review. There's a schedule, I guess, over years where the Beef Code of Practice needs to be kind of reviewed. And so what I can say is that CCA representatives are engaged heavily on that front, and we know that there's a great deal of influence from outside of agriculture on these processes, and we need to make sure that there's practical, real-life influence in changing or developing that code. From an advocacy standpoint, we were really very active in opposing the accession of the UK into the CPTPP. The CPTPP deal we consider to be really the gold standard as far as science and rules-based trade agreement. It provided us preferred access into Japan. It probably opened the door to an increase to Vietnam that we've seen recently. And it's really one that we would point to as being a success for the cattle industry. But quite simply, the rules that are the aspects that the UK were being included into that trade agreement and related that bilateral agreement between Canada and the UK that would need to be put in place as part of that process, quite simply did not meet that high standard. And quite simply, they were not willing to accept our food safety systems that I would argue, I think we all would argue, are second to none. Regularly, we maintain a campaign in particular in Ottawa about talking about the great environmental aspects of having cattle on the landscape. Interestingly, the last time I was there, I was scrolling through Facebook, and I actually had a sponsored ad from Canadian Cattle Association while I was in Ottawa, espousing the benefits of cattle on the landscape. And it never really clued into me before, but that targeted geographic region really kind of improves value for money, right? I mean, it's not realistic for us to do a big public relations campaign because it costs so much money, and we don't have a budget for that. But if you can if you can influence that sphere around Ottawa at a dollar value, a spend that is a fraction what it would be to move, the whole country, then it makes a lot of sense, and we've actually reaped some rewards on that front. So I want to make it clear, there's nothing in my opinion in this room that's off the table. I think if anybody has any questions or comments or feedback or anything, let's lay it out there. I glanced at I opened up the SSGA website, and I saw all of the really the values that are connected with this organization, and every one of them just totally resonate with me. And so one of them was, transparency, and so I want to, I think it's a good opportunity for us to talk about some of these more contentious issues. We know that there is some concern over the Grassland Conservation Initiative, and I'm here to really address that and talk more about it. For those that don't know, the Grassland Conservation Initiative is an initiative where the goal is to maintain grassland, prevent conversion largely to crop production through the mechanism of agreements with conservation groups. So the way it would work is a rancher and a conservation group would come to some agreement as to protecting that land or conserving that land. And that would be possibly on a short term, a medium term, or a perpetuity long agreement. And the idea is that the land stays in the name of the rancher. It does not go and get bought up by conservation groups. And I think that initially, in some of the earlier communications, it wasn't clear. The other thing that I'll say right now about the Grassland Conservation Initiative is that if we don't do anything differently, we can expect that conversion rates will happen, at the same rate, roughly. I think it's an estimate of 150,000 acres every year lost to conversion across the West in particular. In addition to that, if we don't do anything any different, conservation groups like Ducks Unlimited or NCC will continue to get the federal dollars that they get and purchase land. This is the alternative. This is a CCA-driven initiative whereby the land stays with the ranchers, and there would be pretty much two conditions placed on it: no ditching, no draining, no plowing, and it stays intact. To me, the biggest difference maker to me on this was the concept that it didn't have to be a perpetuity agreement. It didn't have to be an easement on the land. That it could possibly be a short-term or a medium-term agreement, 5 to 10 years or 20 to 25 years, and get people comfortable with the idea that this is how I intend to use it for as long as I'm a rancher. There's all this extra value, biodiversity value that I'm bringing to the public good, but I'm not getting paid for it. And so this was a way to lever those federal dollars into really an aligned strategy to prevent conversion at the ranch level. So I wasn't using the slides very well, but I'll maybe just take a quick look. Yeah, as I said, no break, no drain. Medium, short and medium term and longer term agreements. To be absolutely clear, this is an idea. There is nothing that's defined about this yet. Federal government we're talking with them. We're in particular the Environment and Climate Change Canada, but quite simply, there is nothing that's ready to go or ready to use. Like I said, I'll take tons of questions. I know it's a contentious issue, and I want to be clear that we've heard a lot of the concerns over it, and I think they're valid concerns. I really think it makes sense, but I fall back to the idea that if we don't do anything else, then we're just going to see more of what's already happened. And I think there's I think there's a better way. Here's this list of questions that are issues or subjects that I think hopefully will trigger something for somebody. I mentioned actually 234 and 275, but C355 is the bill that would ban the export of horses. CCA has been engaged on that bill as well, in part because many of us are engaged in the same circles, but it really represents a threat to the larger animal agriculture community. As far as the most recent budget goes, the advance payments program, we were advocating to keep it at $350,000. That would be an interest-free portion of the advance payments program. It was announced that that was going to be reduced to $250,000, but if nothing was changed, it was actually going to revert back to $100,000. So I think I would put that in the win category. The tax deferral, livestock tax deferral provision in taxes is something that we're engaging in quite regularly. It showed up in the federal budget, and as a matter of fact, I'm meeting on that later this week to really advocate for an adjustment in the class of cattle that's eligible. But they've suggested some major changes to the timing with which the program is announced, and in addition to that, the areas that would be considered. And I think quite simply it is a tool that is not well utilized, but could be if there were some changes made to it. And so we're working on that right now. We really support some of those agri-stability changes that the Alberta Financial Services Corporation is putting forward and doing a pilot program on. But yet it's, there's nothing set in stone yet, but we're hopeful that those changes will represent a more responsive program for ranchers than what we've seen to date. We want to expand and improve price insurance, livestock price insurance, and I'm really happy to actually announce today that today, I believe, is the first day, or tomorrow, possibly could be the Wednesday, thanks Jody. Wednesday will be the first day that livestock price insurance will be available to eastern cattle producers. It's something we probably take for granted here in the prairies, but it's one thing that has been a long time coming for our eastern counterparts. So my president, Nathan Finney, I'm not even sure he knows yet, but he'll be pretty pumped about finally getting that past the finish line. But one thing that I'll keep moving on because I think I'm I guess I should thank SSGA in particular for their work in driving the environmental messaging very consistently. SSGA provides candidates for the Environmental Stewardship Award that are great ambassadors for the industry. It's a great program that continually gets us into media to tell our story, and so it's really imperative, really, that we continue to do that, because if we don't, somebody else will tell it for us. The youth programs, CCA and YCC and CYL have been really effective of drawing in the younger ranchers and industry types into those programs, and it's phenomenal to see the quality and the engagement that we see on those programs. Last, I'll reference the Say No to a Bad Deal. That was the part of the advocacy work that we set up in addressing the UK's accession into CPTPP. But in general, you can still actually access that. We're not content with the fact that that those negotiations have been paused. But what I will say is that we're hopeful that we're going to get a new UK government that that will re-engage and hopefully get a new, fair, science and rules-based trade agreement past the finish line. A couple other quick things. Guardians of the Grasslands game is now available to classrooms I think in every province. I'm pretty sure even the last one that happened was Quebec, the French language version. For those of you that don't know, the Guardians of the Grasslands movie was just such a huge hit and game changer for really telling our story. And so we've developed a game that engages kids to learn more about the importance of cattle on the landscape, and it's been really good. So please share that, seek that out, and we can provide the links to that if you need it. Of course, we're all looking forward to the Beef Industry Conference that's in Saskatoon this year. In concert with that conference is all the CCA committee meetings, whether that be environment, domestic ag, international trade, and animal health and food policy. If you are attending the conference, I really encourage you to come in and go to, and maybe just sit in on one of those committee meetings, because that producer influence on those committees is, well, we are all producers that sit on those committees, but just getting a wider, broader base for some of those issues and trying to get direction for the organization and our advocacy work is critical. I think I'm going to wrap that up and open it up to questions, and really encourage anybody to step up to the mic and talk.
I'm on. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the great presentation. Italy and Spain has banned lab-cultured meats. Alabama, Florida has done the same. So I'm just wondering if there's any initiative for lobbying the government in this country to take that initiative as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and timely, because as a matter of fact, as part of our international work, we work closely with NCBA and the CNOG, that's the Mexican equivalent of cattle operations. About 3 weeks ago, Nathan Finney was down in Mexico meeting with both the leadership of those organizations, and together, all three organizations agreed on effectively a statement, an initiative that kind of defines how we think the beef industry should respond to this. It lays out a couple of different issues, but quite simply, it's one that that we obviously should be concerned about when ensuring that we are on a level playing field, that in how things are communicated. There's several different issues. So I encourage you to actually take a look at that. If you want, you can contact me, but on the website, on CCA's website, there's a link directly to that joint statement.
I don't know that a lot of people are aware of this, but something that's on the horizon that we have to be aware of is the transgenic focus on the lab of infusing animal protein into soybeans and then utilizing that for lab cultured meats in order to improve the color, texture, and taste. So that's something that's new in Horizon, from what I understand. So that's another area that we probably should be looking at if we're going to develop some legislation to include that as well. So.
Yep, concerning for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
And as
I
far
think
as
there's
the
two others here too, but go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick one. Just an observation, in terms of the conservation program you were referring to, it's interesting that Brazil has the opposite, total opposite, and the government is promoting the breakup of grasslands for croplands. So, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for being here, Tyler. My name's Kelsey Alford. I'm past chair of the Saskatchewan Stock Growers and current chair of the Saskatchewan Stock Grower Foundation. I'd like to make a couple of comments on GCI this morning. You're fortunate that we already have a product that offers that. There's 5 pages in the annual report that explains what the foundation does. When this started coming about 4 years ago, I had the opportunity to speak to all of my CCA representatives, save one, and when we tried to get in contact with that one, he was unreachable, and Chad, over the last 3 years, has tried to communicate with CCA about the development of this, and there's been no consultation back and forth. And so when we had a presentation from Ryder and Larry, and we invited ABP and we invited Western Stock Growers to attend that meeting, it was very clear that we weren't happy with what was being presented as an idea. And run with title is a fancy way to say perpetuity. And when I read the report, it was very, very vague on what was going to be offered. No, we might do this, we might do that. But one thing was very clear was the 10% of $700 million that would, well, we're not sure how that's going to be delivered on, so that's about $70 million in administration fees. And my question would be is, do we believe that perpetuity is the best answer for producers, and why would we go into business with an organization where their main purpose is purchasing land and putting producers off of it? And as the board changes, the rule change, and I know that Ryder made the comment that it's a way that we can influence change, but it's been my experience that the guy who's signing the check has more influence than the guy receiving the money. You're indebted to somebody. So I don't agree with, or I do agree with the idea that we do need to protect these grasslands, and they're precious, and that there's a lot of pressure against us in society in general that beef production isn't a good thing. I don't believe that CCA's purpose, form, and function is to be the deliverable of this. They're my lobby group. They're to lobby for industry advocacy, for trade, for those things. They're not a conservation group. We have conservation groups. You have one in this room.
Yep. Great points, and appreciate your willingness to kind of engage on this. So, to me, what's always kind of been an issue here is that there's been, I guess, an idea that this is defined, that the ideas are all kind of well-defined kind of framework, and this is how it would work. But really, I think it's a starting point that doesn't have a defined thing. I share your concern in as far as CCA's role in this. I think a cattle organization or a cattle-focused organization should help administer it. But I don't see, like, for example, maybe the Canadian Cattle Foundation could be an administering body. I think that the SSGA or SSGF is exactly the model that we need to fit, but it's obviously just in Saskatchewan. It doesn't represent any of the other provinces or regions, and so that's why I think there's got to be just simply an administrator that isn't a conservation group that can ensure that can lever those federal dollars. That's the idea.
We're in Saskatchewan right now. When you call us the model, it doesn't mean that we can't grow in the future. And the other comment I would make is, if it's my understanding that a lot of these dollars are going to come from NCC, what happens when you need to lobby against them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we need to be, in the industry, true to ourselves. We find friends and partners where we're aligned on the same issues, but quite simply, agree to disagree on other things. I don't think there's any role for conservation groups to own ranch land. And that's the perspective that I'm taking when I try to influence the board. But let's be honest, the board in its entirety makes those decisions. Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I guess I'll expand on some of Kelsey's questions. And anytime you do a budget request, there's acres tied to dollars. And so my question is, how is covering the most amount of acres for the least amount of money in the primary producer's best interest?
So just to lay this out, it's really obvious to me the concern that in particular stock growers have brought forward about valuations. And to me, that is a completely undefined component that quite simply would be only determined based on an agreement between the producer and the conservation group. So those projections out there had within that embedded ideas as to maybe what percentage might be on a 5 to 10 year term and a 20 to 25 year term and a perpetuity term. And quite simply, nobody's going to do any of those agreements unless they think that there's value there. And I get the concern. I just don't think we have got to a level where there's any precedent being set about what those valuations are.
And so, sorry, Ryan, I'll just ask it again a different way. The way that Larry has it structured right now is that medium-term easements cannot be renewed. You're forced to go up to an easement in perpetuity if you'd like to keep working with CGI.
Yeah.
And so how is an easement in perpetuity in the primary producer's best interest, and why is the checkoff agency the one that's pushing it on the primary producer?
Yeah, okay, so honestly, I think the answer to that question is we don't think that there would be, any federal dollars that would flow into it without a significant portion of the acres being on a perpetuity. So quite simply, if 100% of us in this room would have no interest in a forever agreement, then nothing's going to get done. And I'm content with that, because ranchers are going to make their own decisions that are best, for their operations. Quite simply, yeah, the influence that I think that the feedback that we've had from the feds is that they need to see, in order for it to be, permanent and all of these things, it has to be forever. And so if maybe this is all for nothing if none of us are willing to do it at any price. Ryan.
Thanks, Tyler. Ryan Bayerbach. So when I look at this, I guess I see it as conservation organizations are already getting money, like NCC and Ducks are already getting money to fund, easements in perpetuity. They're already having ranchers sign up, and there's multiple reasons, whether it's because if they want to keep, say, the McIntyre Ranch in southern Alberta that's worth probably hundreds of millions of dollars together, and each different heir wants something out of that. And we all have seen a situation where two kids move off the farm, one kid stays on the farm, and that farm gets split up, or that ranch gets split up because the siblings want some money out of it, and you don't have enough money to pay the other siblings out, so it gets split. Or the kid that stays home maybe rents from them, or there's multiple different ways to make it work and multiple reasons why it doesn't work. And I've seen a lot of cases where they'll sell an easement to get that money to pay out those, and it allows that ranch to stay as a block and be operated as a viable ranch where it wouldn't be otherwise. Or now we see things like selling a quarter and it'll be covered with solar panels. So if your options are, sell the rights to set up a solar farm or a wind farm on it, or sell a conservation easement on, say, something like the McIntyre Ranch that maybe would end up cultivated and all be farmland. Personally, I'd way rather see that with a perpetual easement that keeps it as a ranch than have it, split up and farmed. And that's up to the rancher. It's not like anybody's forcing them into those deals. They just look at the options and decide what's best. The way I see this working is it would give us more influence over those dollars that are already flowing. Hopefully it would be a reallocation of that money that's going to a group like Ducks Unlimited already, and we would be able to have some control over that. And say something like the Stock Growers Foundation, if a rancher decided they wanted to sign an easement for 15 years with the Stock Growers Foundation, that money could flow to an organization like that to make that happen. So to me, I think it's a win for producers and a win for groups like the foundation that already can hold easements. This would give them more money to facilitate that rather than Ducks doing it. And Ducks hasn't been eager to do anything but a perpetual. This might push them more into some of those short-term easements. And the ranchers that want to sign a perpetual easement would still have that option. And in a lot of cases, it is beneficial to keep that ranch together rather than split into, say, 3 units that might run less than what you can actually make a living on, and then everybody's got to get an off-farm job. So to me, I think that we need to look at the positives and how we can make this work for producers rather than just say, we don't want to work with this group, because I don't think it's directed at certain groups. It's more giving cattle producers and cattle industry more control over where this might go.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to put it. I think that the individual aspect, I think, is what we're trying to support.
Just last.
Sure, yeah.
We'll take one more.
Oh, Gerald Smith, Chaplin, Saskatchewan. You mentioned the supply management, and yet we don't do anything about crown leases. I don't know what they do in Manitoba, but we assign them or sell or whatever. So just, it's essentially the same thing as dairy quota.
I'm sorry, I missed that one word you mentioned. What is it that's essentially the same as dairy quota?
Crown leases.
Okay, yeah.
Like they're more or less.
Well, I mean, I think yeah, so where's the question here? Are like, you're concerned over our position on 282?
No, that's fine, but nobody seems to, like, we all complain about supply management, and maybe we should, but we allow crown leases, which are essentially the same thing.
Yeah, I see the analogy for sure. The one thing that, that supply management is that, it's an intangible right to produce, whereas the crown lease is very much the rangeland that one would use to produce it. And arguably there's some tie to the market value there. But I'm not, that is not my area of expertise.
Yeah, it's just someone with has a large advantage if they do have, well, we'll say relatively cheap grazing land. But that's just my little rant against crown leases. I do it every year, and
Okay.
just happen.
Okay. Very good. Okay. Definitely going to be around here the whole day. Please seek me out if you want to have some more discussion. Thanks.
Yeah, give Tyler a round of applause. His presentation was sponsored by Vito.